What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Supply Chain Disruption and Content Marketing. These are lessons learned from the book Certain Uncertainty by Des Dearlove and the Thinkers 50 group. It is a series of different lessons that we can learn through essays written about how the one thing that is for certain is uncertainty. And for those of you who may be like Jason and I, we uncertainty can be maybe a trigger for anxiety. But in changing our perspectives through learning things from this book, it's helped both of us go and maybe find comfort in the fact that we are prepared for uncertainty because we know that it is certain. So I don't know if that relates to anybody out there, but again, my name is Kevin Jessup. I'm with my co-host Jason Jimenez Vanover. We are part of JCI Marketing, and it's our pleasure to be walking through this with you. If you would like to comment below, we'd love to get to know you a little bit more. If you have anything to add as we're going through any of these things, comment below as well, and let's continue the conversation there. For those who may be new, the whole point behind this is to talk about lessons learned from each individual chapter, but we also want to maybe take some takeaways from what we can learn from that chapter in supply chain disruptions, how that's affected there, and also maybe help, if you're in content marketing within supply chain, find out ways that we can help inspire you to craft content around this. Maybe to give you some ideas. So with that in mind, the focus of this week is the chapter called Leading Sustainably Transitions by Matt Gitsham. I think I said that right. So Jason, what did you take away from this particular chapter?
Thank you, Kevin, for the introduction. That is a loaded question.
I know.
So, in everything, in logistics, supply chain, content marketing, my day-to-day decisions, I'm continuously looking at ways that I can personally make a positive impact. And I just really find it important to see this exact thing popping up across multiple essays that we've read through here. In particular, the idea of sustainability as a business imperative. It's not a nice to have, it is a must have.
Yeah.
And all too often we focus so much on the sustainability side where we're like, okay, let's eliminate waste. But the reality is that there's a larger picture to sustainability. They have to include all parts of ESG, which stands for environmental, sustainability, and governance goals. And that must be a core business principle in both the supply chain and in content marketing, because those are not only buzzwords, but ways that speak to your character as a business, speak to your goals. And I really find it important to, have that.
Yeah. And a lot of our audience may not know this, but Jason, you specifically have been writing and researching in depth around ESG for the better part of a decade. Am I right there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are experiencing some really neat things that are happening. Tomorrow happens to fall on the 10-year anniversary since the first true supply chain content marketing article that I created.
Wow. Hey.
So I did to see that happen, November the 9th, 2013.
Wow.
But there's so much that you can explore and dig into, and there are entire companies devoted to furthering their sustainability goals. We have companies like Sea Roots, we have companies like or Sea Routes, if you have a more southern persuasion.
Correct me if I'm wrong. They're French, right? So you got to say it with an accent.
Yes. But there's several other competitors out there. Sea Roots just happens to be the one that I enjoy looking at because they have a public facing service and you can get
Yeah.
in and just see kind of what you're thinking.
Mhm.
And then we see a lot of TMS platforms and software developers that have really embraced the sustainability initiative over the last decade, where even if it's not necessarily the core focus of a piece, it always has an overture somewhere in
Yeah.
there. It's almost impossible to create a piece of content and not talk about strategic imperatives. And anytime you bring that up, ESG has to be at the absolute forefront, whether or not you're explicitly saying it.
Yeah, and you had mentioned something about a traditional life cycle. What did you? I'm reading your notes here. What was that about? Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Okay, so the traditional yeah, so when we think a lot about our traditional life cycle of different products and what's happening, we see countless examples throughout all industries where they are working to actively.
Edit it out.
Okay, so yeah, when we are looking at the life cycle stages of different products or services, we are constantly bombarded with examples in everyday life of companies that are actively looking at ways they can apply both marketing and their business goals to achieve a more sustainable future. It just so happens that the night before we recorded this last night, I decided to have pizza. And we've seen a massive push in the last year of some of the major pizza, I'm not going to say manufacturers, but
Companies.
companies,
Yeah.
major pizza
Yeah.
companies popping up with more sustainable imperatives. And one of them just so happened to be on here. And it's a pizza box from Domino's, and it says, "This box dreams of becoming another box. Make dreams come true. Recycle this box when you're finished." Now, you don't think about this too much as a major, thing, but the company has absolutely no control over what happens to this once it leaves them.
Yeah.
Instead, they are applying messaging to encourage people to recycle and, do what is right. So, does it have a marked impact that they can measure? Well, maybe not, but it's what's right.
Hmm.
And at JCI Marketing, one of our core values is do what's right, not easy.
Yeah.
And that ties in perfectly with our ESG goals. And it's not just the life cycle; it can be when they're actively using a product. And I have another example to show for that one. So when you talk about sustainability, environment, or governance, another thing that comes into play is the conversation around your health and your choices.
Mm.
That's why we've seen many companies embrace the idea of plant based foods in recent years, sustainable food ingredients. And I also happened to notice this just last night while I was thinking about things to point out in this conversation. This box of brownie mix, typical ingredients: eggs, water, vegetable oil. Relatively sustainable ingredients, right? But they're
Yeah.
not necessarily plant based. So, by virtue of them not being plant based, except for the vegetable oil, of course, by virtue of the eggs not being plant based, there's an issue there. And then you have to think about the people who are going to consume it.
Mm.
Can they realistically consume that many calories in vegetable oil? Is it a healthy alternative? Well, on the side of the box, it has a list of ingredient swaps that you can do that will make the food either healthier, better, or more sustainable. For example, replace 2/3 a cup of vegetable oil with 2/3 of a cup of refined coconut oil.
Mm.
Generally better for your body and more sustainable than not necessarily vegetable oil itself, but perhaps the production processes of vegetable oil.
Yeah.
You can replace the water with dairy or plant-based milk.
Hmm.
That's way it's not gonna, water has no calories, hopefully, depending on where you're getting that water.
Don't
So
drink that water if it has calories.
right,
Don't drink
right.
it.
The water has some extra nutrition.
Yeah.
And then the other one says replace 2 large eggs with half a cup of unsweetened applesauce. You know,
Interesting.
that is perhaps one of the biggest things, and I can attest that that is a really, really good swap on here. So,
I had
it
never
does
heard that
not
before.
it does not impact it at all. It does not impact the flavor. It provides
Wow.
the binding agent. But when you look at it from the ESG side,
Yeah.
you no longer have to worry or be concerned with like what type of ingredients were the chickens that produced those eggs fed.
Yeah.
Were they kept in humane conditions? There is a whole side of it. Now, yeah, sure, you have to be reasonable. How was the applesauce made? Where was it grown? Is it got more
Yeah.
pesticides than a bottle of Roundup or whatever the
Yeah.
case might be? So you want to like just look at things beyond what you see on the surface,
And
and that's yeah.
those are ingredients that you could do yourself. I'm speaking, I'm out here in the country. So, most of my neighbors have chickens. My neighbor across the street has several fruit trees. Like it's in your ability for some of us, if you have the luxury of space, you can grow these things on your own or raise chickens on your own. I can't tell you the last time I've actually paid for eggs, but
Right.
I
Well,
don't know where I'm going with that, but that's just a thing that I'm thinking of. Like, instead of going to the store and using all of these overly processed ingredients that have a lot of negative impacts on supply chain and manufacturing, these are things that I could just homestead myself, and I could make my own applesauce. That is a thing that is in my control. That's really interesting.
definitely. And when you look at the ESG conversation, you also think about the labor resources that go into
Mm,
it.
mhm.
In this book, in this particular chapter, he mentioned that human rights concerns have increased significantly in the last 5 years.
Uh,
And specifically, 10 million more people are in modern slavery in 2021 compared to 2016 global
yeah,
estimates. And to me, that just breaks my heart
yeah,
because there are people that are, you know, let's back up for a moment. So, like, what is modern slavery, right? It is not paying fair wages or exploiting them in some way to where you are not um, doing what's right.
mhm,
Is it illegal? Yes, but there's a very fine line at which that legality comes. Well, it's coming from this part of the world, or maybe it's, maybe the laws are not that great in this area. That is part of the reason that there's been such a push in recent years for increased nearshoring,
yeah,
because when you have nearshoring, you may not necessarily know exactly what is happening. For those who are unaware, nearshoring involves moving your manufacturing supply chains from overseas to a nearby country. So, for example, moving from China to Mexico or to Canada, if for those of us in the US. So, when all of that is going on, you have to think, okay, is this the right move for the business? Is this the way that we're going to work to prevent human rights violations?
yeah,
And how are we going to be better?
yeah. And it's not even that simple. Like, for example, a close friend of mine is a police officer nearby, and he was just telling me last night about a raid that happened over the weekend, where several local businesses were involved in a very elaborate human trafficking ring.
Oh no.
Um, and I don't know if you know this, Jason, but like DFW, where I'm based, is one of the biggest hubs for human trafficking in the nation. Wild. I would have never thought that. But there was a business in my town that got shut down. And then another one in a nearby town, and then another one in Fort Worth, that were all part of the same ring. So yes, what you were saying is absolutely true, that exploiting your workers, that is part of the modern slavery. But let's not maybe discount the fact that legit actual slavery in old terms is still a thing that happens today. And it's not that it happens overseas, it can happen right here in America. So those are all things that everyone should just kind of be aware of. It doesn't get talked about often enough, but it is a very real part of reality that everyone should just kind of know about,
Yes.
unfortunately.
I will confess, I did not know that about DFW. For those of you who do not know, I am based out of San Antonio. So oftentimes we see the topic of human trafficking here occurring with people that are illegal immigrants that have been brought in, and companies or individuals have taken advantage of them. You know, the biggest things that happen here that make that type of news are where they have loaded people into the back of vans, semi van, like the full
Yeah.
dry van trailer. And people are packed in there like crazy.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking. And the last big thing that happened with that, it occurred in the middle of summer. And there was a significant loss of life, and it's just it really wrenches at your heart.
Yeah.
So as marketers, we have to walk a fine line of saying we're not exploiting those news stories, but rather we're bringing awareness to them.
Yeah.
And we have to find a way to blend that with the unique value prop of each company, and then position it to where at the end of the day, someone reads it or sees it and says, this is something I can believe in. Whether or not they are ready to convert and become a customer,
Yeah.
getting them to believe in you is the first step.
Mhm.
That's the very first step on our marketing flywheel, attracting,
Yeah.
engaging. And I find it important to keep up with some of those goals and activities.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it towards the end of our talk today about what content marketers can do in actual action items. But the whole basis behind it is, we're not arrogant enough to believe that we're we're going to solve the problem. But if we can encourage people to talk, if we could somehow inspire a conversation to take place, maybe something can just be pushed forward a little bit. And if that happens enough, then there's a chance for change. They are very complicated issues, and we're not trying to change the whole thing and fix the problem. But if we can bring it up often enough across all of the ESG issues, with climate change and etc., at least we can get the ball moving in the right direction.
Most definitely, and right now we are getting ready for our holiday season, which
Yeah.
has historically, this is the big game for the supply chain.
Yeah.
But this year is different. This year we see many specific examples of areas where ESG goals are at risk.
Yeah.
This past week, we watched as Maersk laid off 10,000 workers. Now, is that, a human rights violation or anything like that? No. But when you introduce those unstable elements of people that do not have an option, that do not
Yeah.
have another job, what happens to those people that were laid off? They become instantly into a higher risk of human trafficking or modern slavery, or maybe they're not able to make sustainable decisions, because we all know that some of our sustainably sourced foods are significantly more expensive.
Yeah.
And it can have a compounding effect.
Yeah.
We've also seen cases where companies have had to take additional steps to protect their workers. Right now, even with a broad market downturn, we do have areas and pockets of high activity. Southern California. We've had record-setting imports in the Port of Long Beach and Port of Los Angeles for the last 2 months,
Yeah.
beyond anything that happened in the pandemic. And California also has, the AB5 law, which means that contractors, if they're performing the same actions for the purposes of taxes, need to be classified as employees, even if they're still technically contractors. It's a conversation that occurs a lot when you're working with owner operators. But those have a root in ESG. They have a root in sustainability, because for tax purposes, maybe they do need to be counted as an employee, because how do you differentiate a contractor from an employee when both of them are doing the same job?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the whole thing in California, at least.
Yeah.
So
And
what do you
there's a lot of we had talked earlier about the multiple bankruptcies that are happening as well. It's
Oh,
just,
yeah.
gosh.
Yeah. The list has grown too long to memorize
Yeah.
at this point, because we have our big names,
Mhm.
Yellow, Convoy, but almost every day there is some other company that is going bankrupt.
Yeah.
And this was something that I started seeing occur and saw warning signs of at the very height of the pandemic, where I had friends that decided to launch their own trucking companies.
Mhm.
Fantastic promotion ideas, great ideas, super proud of what they did.
Yeah.
But those companies arose solely out of that extreme need of
Yeah.
2021. So now these individuals, they no longer are doing that. They had to adapt, and they weren't able
Yeah.
to successfully navigate that transition. And there are a multitude of companies that, I mean, it's mind-boggling when you think about it, because remember, 90% of all trucking companies in the US are owner-operator companies, or those made up of fleets with less than 5 trucks.
Wow.
So how many individual trucking companies within a 50-mile radius might have went out of business? They might not have even
Yeah.
had a website. They
Yeah.
might not have had any sort of digital presence, but they were able to survive because we had demand that just kept going up.
Yeah.
And as we approach a season of rebalancing, I think it was either Bill Cassidy or Lars Jensen over at JOC.com that had mentioned the market isn't necessarily rebalancing. The market is resetting in its typical 3-year cycle. So it's a sooner than expected downturn, but we're going to see the pendulum start to shift.
Yeah.
And as it shifts, companies that take the steps now to ready their content for a sustainable future, even when things are worrisome, like they are right this instant,
Yeah.
companies that do take those steps are going to be in a better position when it does rebalance, because they will have a head start.
Yeah.
And that's
And,
really
and
what it all is.
and we had talked about that the other day. Like, I think a lot of these bigger companies, maybe they thought too much of themselves, thought they were
Well,
like impervious to financial ruin. And what are your thoughts on there?
so
I don't want to go, like, we're supposed to be talking about
so
sustainability.
yeah, so let's not say anything that's going to get us sued
Oh yeah,
by
yeah.
someone.
Allegedly.
Some companies may not have made the wisest decisions, but you can also look at it through the lens of business. When a downturn occurs, layoffs are to be expected.
Yeah.
It is more what those companies do to help in the meantime that can really tie directly to sustainability. I have friends and business acquaintances that came from Yellow that held positions of power. And when they found out what was going to happen at Yellow, their top priority as a manager or sales leader was not necessarily to find a replacement job for themselves. It was to find a replacement position for those beneath them.
Yeah.
They're direct reports. And there are at least 2 people I know of that achieved that goal. You know, they 100% of their teams are now at other companies that have taken the initiatives, just like I just said.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
I just find that really empowering when you think, okay, you know, sustainability, we've got all of these things happening. We have California, you know, starting in January, you cannot register a new diesel truck
Yeah,
in
that's gonna be
California.
wild, man.
I think it's gonna be interesting to see what's going to happen
Yeah.
because it's just, you know, companies with existing fleets that are diesel trucks,
Mhm.
they have so long to phase them out. You know, it's not only electric trucks when you think about
Yeah.
sustainable trucks. We have compressed natural gas trucks. They can do it all. We
Yeah.
have electric trucks, new manufacturers popping up constantly. And then
Yeah.
we have some companies that, you know, saw this coming years ago and started switching over. And January 1st is just January the 1st.
Yeah.
But they've built in that protective foundation. And now they're building in the content marketing strategy around it to,
Yeah.
because why? Well, we're close to that deadline. So the
Yeah.
people that did not ready themselves for it, they're now trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? Because what is generally happening is that companies are becoming more liable for the total emissions released in their value chain. And
Mhm.
remember, the supply chain is everything you can control, and that goes beyond, right? The value chain is when you get far enough that you can't necessarily control it, but you should be mindful of it. We go
Mhm.
back to that egg example. The value chain is, you know, were those eggs produced, and then how did they get to a distributor before they got to the store?
Yeah.
That is the value chain up through that distributor point. But then you think about it from, you know, your backyard hens, chickens. You have complete control over that to an extent.
Yeah.
What are you feeding them?
Yeah. Woo.
Where are you buying them food?
There's a lot of crickets nearby.
Well, okay. And you know what? Just for our audience, I've seen Kevin's backyard. It's big. Remember, chickens are the scavengers of the land, so
Yeah.
they eat plenty of. They eat very well.
Yeah.
But for others like myself that live in maybe a more urban area,
Yeah.
you have to think beyond your typical stuff. You have to think like, you know, I remember a time where when I had chickens and was super excited and I was feeding them food from my good old fashioned country store down the road and got to looking at it and realized that that food had more antibiotics in it than a
Yeah.
pharmacy.
Yeah.
So, you know, had to, you know, kind of rethink like, okay, is this truly healthier? And how could we reshape that?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just an ongoing conversation
Mhm.
where we're able to look at things and say, is this what's going to be easy?
Yeah.
Maybe not. Yes.
Yeah. And speaking of, that conversation as we're, coming towards the end of our talk, would like to just give maybe a couple insights as maybe if you are in content marketing, how can you craft some ideas, maybe get inspired in this area and craft content for your company. There's a couple takeaways that I'd like to give you from this particular chapter. Again, it's Certain Uncertainty. We highly recommend this book. What was this, chapter 9, I think? Yeah,
Yes, sir. Chapter 9.
there we go. So, one of the takeaways was finding ways to promote sustainable products or innovations that your company is doing. So, a lot of times, your company is doing this anyways, because maybe your C-suite and maybe HR is talking about finding ways to be more sustainable and more for cost-effective reasons, but it's still great for the environment. Um, Talk to them, talk to your upper management and leadership to find out what different sustainable projects are coming down the line, or maybe things that you're already doing, and find ways to talk about that. Yeah, there we go. There's the book. Anything that you are doing that is maybe disruptive change. You can craft narratives about how your company is leading the charge in that sector, if that's a thing. And then also the kind of like what I was talking about just before, the multi-fiduciary obligations. So I was reading about this. I think it was actually in a college course I took years ago, but it talked about corporate responsibility. And it's not just to your internal stakeholders, but it's the community that you're around. It's what impact are you having locally, globally, and how can you craft a narrative where you get to explain that. Now, we've talked about this in the past, but it's in the content marketing flywheel. You have attract, you have delight, and you have engage. It's really talking to different groups of people. So this would be content where you're not really trying to sell anything. It's not about selling. And if you are using it to sell, it might come off as disingenuous. This is something where you get to just talk about what your company is doing because it's the right thing to do. And you want to maybe fill in the gaps of knowledge gaps for your audience, maybe for more current customers that you have, just to kind of fill them in and let them know what you as a company are doing. That's a great idea. It's a different way to just engage with your current base. So also anyone who isn't doing business with you, it's nice to know that, like, I'll speak for myself. If I know that a potential company that I might be doing business with in the future is doing something that's sustainable, I'm more likely to want to pursue them. So that's another way that you can help out your company in crafting those things. Of course, you're not doing it for those reasons. You're not doing it to try and win customers. You're doing it because it's the right thing and you want to provide knowledge to your customers, both internal, external, all that. It's about pushing the ball forward. Really think about your intentions when you're crafting that kind of content. If you haven't already, go ahead and put that up there, Jason.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This is our newsletter, right, at JCI Marketing. And the reason I wanted to show this is ESG has to permeate everything you do.
Yeah.
So you have to be mindful of what you are doing. And in the JCI newsletter, we talk about what we are doing. We talk about our content inspiration, marketing tips that you can do on your own. But the bottom one is the one I want to draw your attention to: community involvement. And these are straight up things that JCI Marketing is out getting involved in and doing to promote that key phrase you said a while ago, Kevin, corporate social responsibility, which is, practically a synonym for applied ESG in a business setting.
Yep.
So this newsletter is a great opportunity for people to, see what's happening at JCI Marketing, get some actionable tips if maybe they're not ready to invest in content marketing yet, but maybe they need to do it themselves for now. There's content marketing tips in here. We've got content inspiration. We've got news about Convoy. This is a newsletter from a few weeks back, but the whole premise is helping you to achieve your goals, because we know that by doing so, we're doing what's right, not easy. What would be easy would be just emailing a bunch of people or tossing it all into ads, but that's not going to achieve our goals. And instead, we're really focusing on ensuring that we have clients that understand what we are doing, ensuring that we have clients that align with our values, and ensuring that together we can succeed and grow.
Yeah.
So if you want to sign up for that, comment below or DM myself or Mr. Kevin with your email address, and we will add you to our newsletter. It goes out every Friday afternoon.
Yep. And there's a really easy way to do it. If you're on LinkedIn, It's a shorter version that doesn't have nearly as much. The best one is the one that we do via email. Again, you can reach out to us that way. Also, let us know. Take a second and comment what your company is doing around the area of ESG. Just brag on your company for a minute. If there's anything that you as an individual are doing, I'd love to know. And if there's anything that we can do to partner and support each other in that realm, that would be awesome as well. You can DM me or Jason, or simply just comment below. We'd love to get in touch.
Definitely. So I just want to say thank you to everyone that made it out to our recording this week. Next week, we're going to move on from sustainability to navigating paradoxes,
Oh
which
boy.
I think is going to be a really exciting and interesting conversation because sometimes sustainability does come at a price.
Mm,
Because the most commonplace example, something I started harping on about 8 years ago, fast shipping is not necessarily good for any type of ESG goal
yeah.
because faster it moves, the greater its carbon footprint.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for joining us today. I appreciate your time and I look forward to continuing our conversation next week.